and welcome to the Personal Hope Book, a fundamental resilience tool. My name is Dan, and I will be managing today's program. And today's program is presented as part of our free Hope series, Healing Online for People Everywhere, which we created in 2020 at the start of the pandemic to support the resilience of our global community through social emotional arts. And we would like to begin by acknowledging the Tongva Nation, on whose land the city of Los Angeles, where we are based, rests today. We hold respect and gratitude for the Tongva people, who still consider themselves the caretakers of this land. And by their example, we're reminded of our responsibility to our planet and to one another. So let's take a moment in our own way to honor the indigenous communities of past and present on whose land you are joining from today. Today's program is in a meeting format, so please keep yourself muted until prompted otherwise. And we suggest that you stay on gallery view throughout the session. And to help with efficiency, please raise your digital hand when prompted for questions and comments. And if you have the latest version of Zoom installed, the raised hand button is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen under Reactions. And you can also find it by clicking on the Participants button at the bottom. And then in that window, you can click Raised Hand. So let's welcome today's presenter, Erin Partridge. Erin is an artist and board-certified registered art therapist. Her clinical experience includes work in community, pediatric, forensic, and geriatric settings. And she is published in the areas of art therapy, elder care, gender, research methods, professional development, and technology. Erin works as a professor and a researcher in the elder care field, and her research interests incorporate the lived experience and focus on the participatory, ethnographic, and arts-based approaches. Her first book, Art Therapy with Older Adults, Connected and Empowered, was published in February 2019. And her second book, Getting On in the Creative Arts Therapies, was published in 2021, focused on career trajectories in all the creative arts therapy disciplines. It includes practices designed to stimulate creative thinking about professional development. And with that, I will hand it over to Erin Partridge.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so glad to be here with you all today. And while I am getting my sharing set up, just want to say a couple of things. The first one being acknowledging that I'm here in my studio with two parrots, and they're in the background, and we may hear from them a couple of times. Some of you, I see some of my students here in the session, and they know that the parrots sometimes like to join in. Got Sammy over here and Griffin right behind my head. So we'll hope for the best. If they do lapse into their fire alarm sounds, we'll go ahead and I'll bring them a little bit closer so that they stop with the fire alarm sounds. So a little bit about what we're going to cover today. The goal is to explore the potential of a personalized book of hopeful quotations and art as a means to increase the subjective experiences of hope. And this is based on initially a group that I developed, but have since then continued to evolve it and change it and adapt it into different environments. So we'll do an introduction. I'll give you an overview of some of the different settings and ways that I've incorporated this practice. We'll engage in a creative bookmaking process, and then we'll engage in some discussion and sharing. So that's a little bit of the outline of what we'll cover. And again, I would love to have your questions. So I will pull the chat up so I can see it here, and feel free to ask along the way with the raise hand function, and we'll have a little time for questions and sharing towards the end. All right. So first, we're going to start out with a poll. So on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not so great and 5 being 2 thumbs up, awesome, how are you feeling right now? Go ahead and enter that there. Right, so I see we're skewing a bit towards the higher end. I'm glad to see that. It's wonderful. All right, looks good. Looks good. We're all kind of skewing towards that higher end, which is really excellent to see. Great. So keep that in mind as we move through our time today. All right. So I'd love to have you put into the chat. We've already done introductions as to name and pronouns and where we're joining from, but I invite you to put into the chat any populations of interest and your personal definition of hope. This doesn't need to be a long thing, could be one word, but just a few things to explain, how do you define hope in your own life? What does hope mean to you? Go ahead and put that into the chat. And maybe it's not words, it could be a color, it could be a creature. Okay, so I see being present, desire, wish, earnest prayer, and faith. Endless possibilities, yes. These are great. Energy driver. Hope is having an anchor in the midst of challenges. Yes, feeling safe, possibility. I'm seeing them come in more quickly. This is wonderful. Optimism, light. Okay, so adults and people in recovery, hopes means being able to see the possibilities. Yes. Faith laced with doubt. Faith and positivity, grounded, health, joy, interested in adolescence and possibilities. Yeah, believing in possibilities, a half full glass, seeds of joy, believing something can happen, belief. Okay, so interest in working with women who are feeling stuck and middle schoolers, contentment, adolescence. Okay, these are great. Thank you all. And you can continue to enter those into the chat as you think of them. We are going to play with those words a little bit after the session is over. A feeling and action as strength. That's great. Wonderful. All right. So before we move on, I want to advise you that I'm going to show a couple different contexts where I've used this practice and some quotes that have been relevant in those contexts. I am actively encouraging you to steal this idea. Go out there, do this. I want more processes of instilling more hope into our clients and communities. But just a reminder to adapt it for relevancy and inclusiveness in the population that you work with. Okay, so again, the quotes that I'm going to go over today and that we're going to work with are the ones that were utilized in the specific context that I'm going to talk about. All right, so just the denotation of hope here. So hope is to cherish a desire with anticipation, to want something to happen or be true, to desire with expectations of attainment or fulfillment, and to expect with confidence. We've got some example statements here. When it's used as a noun, it's a desire accompanied by an expectation or belief in fulfillment. Expectation of fulfillment or success. Someone or something on which the hopes are centered. And something desired or hoped for. All right, so we're going to do a really quick experiential at this point with some of your paper and materials that you have around. Hopefully you have some. If not, a Post-it note works. You can write it onto a Post-it and put it somewhere later. But I'd invite you to create something that represents your definition of hope. So again, this might be a color, it might be an object, it might be something in your life. You can feel free to work digitally and print it out later. But I really do encourage that the Hope book be something physical, be something that you can turn the pages of. So we'll take just a brief moment to even just start that out. There's something really powerful about writing the words, about putting them on paper. Great. And I'm looking back through more of these hope definitions. These are wonderful. And so the prompt is here to create an image, to create a single page of your definition of hope. What does it look like, feel like, sound like? Maybe it has a color. Maybe it's a certain image or animal or place that is hope to you. There's no right or wrong for this. I'll show you a bit later some examples from some clients who have done this. And if you don't have materials with you right now, you can write it down, do something to make that mark though, beyond just typing it in the chat. We'll take one more moment for this. And if you're not really sure still, run yourself through all the senses. What does hope smell like? Does it have a smell? Does it have a sound? A texture? How much space does it take up? Think about it from all sorts of different directions. All right, thank you. And so I would love to invite us to, if you can, shift your Zoom environment to gallery view. And with your Zoom environment in gallery view, go ahead and hold up your definition of hope, if you've got one on paper. Hold it up really close to the screen so that you kind of disappear and what we see is your image. Oh, these are great. I'm seeing some similarities here. These are wonderful. Great. And then if you haven't done so, because I think we're going on to 2 screens here, you can click through and see the other screens worth of folks. Wonderful. Great. All right, so why focus on hope? There's some different reasons that we might do this, right? We have that kind of this intuitive sense of why we might focus on hope. I love what Highmore and Taylor wrote about this, though, that addressing and cultivating hope in the clinical, workplace, and community settings is a form of mood work. It can make vivid the collective and historical dimension of felt culture. So what you see here are some employees in a corporate environment, a team here working together. We have HR, operations, direct client services, strategy, and finance all represented at this table. And they're all sitting around the table creating together. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. You're not seeing the share screen? Can I get a thumbs up from? We're good. Okay. You might have to click back out of gallery view. Okay, great. So you can see here a little bit of how I've done this work with environments where I can get a little messy and we can work together in this way. So we see the collection of collage materials going down the center of the table. This is the conference room table in a nonprofit setting. and some different mark making tools and the different papers. Okay. So again, why focus on hope? So we understand it, right? We have this understanding of this word hope, but we struggle to define it. And by struggle, I mean, we don't have one very clear, singular definition of hope. And that's the good thing about it. But it's also means that we need to spend a little time understanding what it means for us, or making space for clients and communities and different people that we work with, for them to understand what hope means in their life. We also make assumptions about who has or does not have hope. And some of these assumptions can actually have physical implications for clients and patients. We make assumptions about circumstances that promote or reduce hope. And then the research shows that there is an impact of hope on our biopsychosocial well-being. So this isn't just some fluffy thing. It's not just about, giving someone a bouquet of flowers and a balloon. This is important work, this focus on hope. And I think that right now, in the context of this session and the world that we're in at this time, we really need this time for hope. And so I'm so pleased to be here with you all, focusing on hope for a little while on our Friday. Wendell Berry wrote that it may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And when we no longer know which way to go, we have come to our real journey. Okay, so hope, that's great. Why books though? Why books, and why so structured? Because you'll see in a moment how structured this process has been in the past. And it's structured because it's a form of ritual. So the way that I've run this in the past is over time, following the same process and engaging in the process in the same way, even though the quotes are different each time. And rituals become the vehicle through which we can contain and express emotion. And that idea of contain is important as well, because the book itself becomes a container for our hope, for our explorations around hope. So this process was begun at the Coalinga State Hospital down in Central Valley of California. For those of you who aren't sure where Coalinga is, but you are familiar with driving in California, it's the place where it smells so bad, right at Harris Ranch, right there. So just moments from all the feedlots is this huge maximum security treatment facility, primarily housing men who were convicted of committing a sex offense. Okay. So why hope in that setting? Why do we need hope there? Because it is a state hospital, not a prison or a jail. And we did have a therapeutic orientation and a recovery culture. And we also had an externally enforced focus on improving treatment, because many of the state hospitals were under court receivership at the time that Coalinga was built and opened. And so we needed to focus on improving treatment and focusing on things like hope and resilience and change. Whereas before it was really just about put these people somewhere. Okay. Now, if we want people to engage in treatment, we need to think about what do they need in order to do that. Okay. And we know that for people who have been hospitalized for a long time, they feel a lack of personal control, a loss of dignity, and a loss of hope for recovery. So this book was designed as part of the 12-week curriculum there. And the way it worked is individuals would sign up, and it was a group that they would attend once a week. Every week I showed up with a different set of quotes for them that I had formatted using different beautiful fonts and printed out and ready to go for them. And then they had paper, and we would read the quotes aloud, and then they could choose which one they wanted to use. And then we would spend the bulk of the 2-hour group making, and the other art therapist and I would make together with them. We would all engage with this hopeful content. And then at the end, we would share our work. So this is an example of what this would look like. So I would give them a piece of paper and it would have this quote with several others that were related to a similar aspect of hope. So this one was part of the week where we looked at how do you find hope in the difficulty? Where does it show up? And that was one of the things that the individuals at the state hospital really resonated with, because many of them had had not only difficult lives, but then difficulty in prison, and then difficulty being under an indeterminate civil commitment at the state hospital. And so what this would look like is something like this. So here you see the formatted quote for them. This is a crest that one of the individuals created as his armor. And the first round of the group was interesting because it was really the diversity of patients that we had at the state hospital. So one person who, or two people whose crimes had been towards children, 3 who had committed rape or other sexual assault, 2 who had a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and 2 of them had limited to no reading ability. And that was interesting because it ended up creating a real resilience point for those individuals. These are 2 pages by the same individual. You can see the use of color and beautiful artwork. This individual was known as an artist in the hospital. And for the individuals with low or no literacy, the process of reading the quotes aloud was very important in them feeling included in the group. And then it also allowed them to ask for help in a way that felt safe for them. It also showed some of their coping. So what we saw is as we read the quotes aloud as a whole group, they would draw little pictographs in the margins of the paper, giving themselves little symbols to remind them what the quote was about so that they could make their art. And both of those individuals were very into making images and very creative and artistic. I love this hummingbird. This individual actually called them a honeybird. And what you see in the background, you see the blue mountains a little bit there. This individual is using something that we call a prison airbrush. And it's where you take paper and you rip the edges of it and then brush back against it. With chalk, you can use colored pencil or oiled pastel, but chalk works the best. And this individual is very proficient at this process. I wanted to share one more image from the state hospital. And this one is why the book form itself was important. This individual almost never chose to use the quotes that we provided, but always came and always made art. And this was his hopeful image on that day. But some interesting things about this image is he said this was him on the outside, him once he was released. But what we see here is he's wearing actually the enforced uniform of the sexually violent predator in the state hospital. And if we look at his feet, they really don't look like they're going to take him very far. He's got his hands in his pockets. His facial expression sure doesn't look all that happy to be out. And then if you look very closely, the marks that are holding that banner up behind him almost look like chains. So the art enabled us to see some of what was incongruent in the spoken word versus what they would make images of. And then the really powerful thing about this image in particular is these are 2 facing pages in a bound book. So imagine what happens when you close this book, right? This individual comes face to face with that brick wall. Really powerful. One of the things that was really important in this group was understanding and helping folks to feel like there was change, not just the individuals, that they were capable of change, but for all of us as the treatment providers, that we could think outside of the narrative about these individuals and imagine that they could change. And that helped inspire us to offer better treatment, to be with the individuals as individuals, rather than seeing them as a summation of the crimes they'd committed and the horrible things that they'd done in the world, because they had done horrible things. And it was difficult to read their charts and read their criminal histories sometimes. But connecting with the human element was really important in providing ethical treatment. So hope in the workplace. We've got here, we talked in the beginning about this idea of assumptions about hope, and sometimes in the workplace, oh, well, we can't sell hope, so why are we bothering spending time with that? Or hope doesn't impact the bottom line. But what you see here from the literature is that hope actually is important in our workplaces. And the more that we can think about where hope might show up in our workplaces, the better off, the more resilient and productive and good our workplaces are going to be. So here are some examples of some workplace created images. Just click through these. Sometimes people will take the quotation and then add their own ideas, their own interpretations of them. This is a wonderful way to work with it. And collage is really rich. Sometimes taking a funny approach. And what I've observed in the workplace is that people come in and the room gets very quiet. And there's just a lot of really beautiful, joyful making. Show you a few more. I always like to see the ones where they've used the same quote and have thought about it in completely different ways. And this person exemplifies one of the really powerful parts about it being a book. And I've seen this over and over, no matter what setting we've done this in, whether it's a workplace or a conference or a forensic state hospital or a hospital or a group of folks just getting together, is that when we get to the end and they assemble their book, there's this point where they turn it over and they're holding a book that they created. They created every page, they selected every quote, and they incorporated imagery that has personal meaning to them. And so this is an HR professional, and she said, I'm looking back on what I did, and I'm like, oh, I did good. It's nice to look back on it after working on this for several months. So there's that moment of reflection when the book is completed. That's really, really important to this process. All right. So I would love to invite you to engage with this process of hope. And I think what we will do, is the book ever completed? Great question, Lita. So I have one here that I work on every time I do a presentation about this or working on it with other people. This one I've not bound yet. So part of the process of doing this is working on the pages separately and then deciding on the order and then binding it in the end. That was the practice that we did in the state hospital setting and that we've done in the workplace. However, if you're doing it just for yourself, there's no reason you can't leave it unbound and continue working on it as you go. I'm going to stop sharing here for a moment so I can show you. I'll show you how this works. So if I have my individual page that I've worked on to go in my book, I fold it in half. And then when I have my collection of pages, I do a little glue line here along the edge. And then I line that up with my existing book, corner to corner, edge to edge, but just a little glue. I'm not gluing it flat. I'm gluing just the edge. And if you want to look this up, it's called a modified accordion binding. So easy. I've done this with all ages. Okay, from like 2.5 up to 107. And people with PhDs and people with learning disabilities, people with physical limitations, and people whose muscles are bulging out of their sweaters. Okay, so the beautiful part of this is it's a really accessible way to make a book, and you end up with something in the end that really does look and feel like a book, like a real book that you would buy in the store. And isn't that so much more powerful than going to the bookstore? I mean, support your local bookstore, but going to the bookstore and buying a book of quotes that someone else has pulled together and said, here are the quotes about hope. And here's some images that go with that. But could you instead invite people to add their own images to it? And to select the quotes that really have meaning to them. So in the initial design, the quotes were all relevant to that setting. In adapting it for other audiences, there's been this process of, again, curating and finding quotes that are most relevant to the particular setting at hand. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And I'm going to go back to one of these quotes. And what I'd like to invite you to do now is take a little bit of time with this quote, and we will provide for you later. You'll get a PDF that has quotes formatted and ready to go for a book. So you'll get a big collection of formatted quotes that are ready to go that you can build into a book yourself. I encourage you to use it with others, adapt it with others. I would love to hear about it. But for now, we'll use this one. And we'll take just a little bit of time to engage in some active making. Sitting with this quote and seeing what's there, what images come up, what colors. So the way the group has been done in the past, I've provided the printed quote, but there is something powerful about writing it out yourself as well. The kinesthetic process of writing it. So we're going to take a few minutes to work on this. And I'm going to keep gently talking. I'm not going to say anything earth-shattering. So if you would like to work in silence, you can mute me.
Oh, I'm wondering if you would so kindly read the quotation, please.
Sure, absolutely. I pick my favorite quotations and store them in my mind as ready armor, offensive or defensive, amid the struggle of this turbulent existence. So it's said by Robert Burns. I'll repeat it for you again. I pick my favorite quotations and store them in my mind as ready armor, offensive or defensive, amidst the struggle of this turbulent existence. And Dan's also put it into the chat for you all too. If you get to a point that you feel stuck, think about, is there one of those words that really resonates with you? And since this is your book, you can also decide, you know what, I don't like that part of the quote and I want to take it out. I want to change it to a different word. Don't need to have APA format for your personal hope book. So just start to work your way towards a pausing point. And I'm using that word pause intentionally because this is not very much time. And I would encourage you to continue to sit with this quote and continue to work with it. Just gently bringing yourself to a place where you might pause. So start to come back to our group here. And before I stop sharing and invite you all to share a little bit, I want to encourage you to take the rest of your afternoon, if you're able to, or whatever time of day it is where you are, and use your own definition of hope, as well as this page that you've begun, and start to have those first 2 pages of your personal hope book. And as you're looking to fill it with some more, and like Dan said, you will be receiving a little library of quotes from me that are formatted and ready to go. But I'd encourage you to think about both the presence and absence of hope in the quotes that you select for yourself or for your clients or for communities that you work with. And also consider adding your own definitions of hope to the book alongside dictionary text or other things that you find that kind of stake a claim about what hope is. So I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see each other a little bit better here. And I would like to invite a few folks to share, if you would. So you can go ahead and raise your hand if you're interested in sharing your image, your response to that quote, anything you noticed. Before we call on anybody, I just want to mark that the parrots were very quiet while you were all making. So we all went into this kind of liminal, hopeful space together. Would anyone like to share? Lashada, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I'm just going to share my image. And it's basically just a line drawing, an outline of an abstract of the human body.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And you wrote the quote in the upper corner there?
Yes, and I wrote the quote in the upper corner. So it just reminded me of the nervous system from head to toe, how emotions can manifest into physical things and vice versa. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Elaine has her hand raised.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just giving her a thumbs up, but I'll go. It's interesting because I didn't find this quote very hopeful at all. I didn't really like any of the words at all. So I had a hard time like connecting with it. But one of the words was armor, and I do Reiki, and we ground ourselves. So you have protect yourself. So I kind of interpreted it that way. And the like the areas of the body with the rainbow, and then kind of like a twisted knot here was how I've interpreted the struggle of existence. So I tried to make it as, my vibe is positivity. So I was like,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so it's such a great example, right? Because this quote was chosen for a population that really resonated with that idea of a turbulent existence and
Right,
needing
yeah.
armor,
Yeah,
right?
makes sense.
And that's not always going to be an aspect of hope that all people are going to want to engage with or think about or have relevant to them. And so
Yeah.
encouraging folks to choose just a single word from it or make their own interpretation of it or edit it is a really important practice.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I see call-in user 1.
Oh, hi. Thank you for letting me share what I wrote. I love that quotation, by the way. So I wrote a little ode to Rumi, who is my favorite poet, and based on the theme of our responses today. O Rumi, you of eloquent tongue and elegant words of the divine, from the divine, that inspiration fires my heart, guides my own pen. Your words arm me for battle and disarm me to be vulnerable. You who have been through the fire and awash in heavenly waters, you keep me in fixed attention, receptive through the longing, in reading of your yearnings. You keep me in fixed attention, receptive through the longing, in reading of your yearnings, always with hope, with trust, the hope and trust that fuel the same journey. Thanks for letting me share that.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, so I see Fiona and then Marie.
Oh, hi, sorry. It's just my computer has some tricky problems. I was giving a pass to another participant.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Marie.
I don't know if you can see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. It's for me, it was a kind of a lightness and not an armor, but like a Superman cape that you have that protect yourself, and a hive, the symbol of the hive, because you find hope being with others too, not only for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for letting me share.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Marie. And that aspect of hope with others, that was one of the other topics that was explored in that initial group, was finding hope from other people. And then another week we did finding hope from within yourself. So yeah, great, wonderful. Chris?
Gotta figure out how to get, there we go. Okay. And I'm not sure how that's gonna work.
There we go.
Okay, so at the very corner, sorry, that's making it a little more difficult. But at the very corner, you can see there's just turbulence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and at the corner, I put the quote in up here. And then in the waves, I wrote, I've started writing in a quote that I really liked. And it says, peace, it does not mean to be in a place where there's no noise, trouble, or hard work. It means to be in the midst of those things and still be calm in your heart.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Chris. And thank you for sharing. Really appreciate you all sharing those images and your interpretations of the quote. I'm going to really quickly go back to sharing my screen. Just to go through some good practices for yourself, good practices if you decide to incorporate this with groups of people, whether that's clinical or non-clinical settings, is to remember that your material offerings also help to inspire hope. So in the state hospital, it was really important that we showed up not only with these beautifully formatted quotes for the individuals, telling them that their lives were worth having some hope in them, but we'd also bring special materials. So not just the markers and the colored pencils and the oil pastels that were pretty standard to the art therapy treatment groups. We would bring other things. We'd bring in different collage materials. We'd bring in scraps and bits from the weaving lab or from other areas of the building, and something a little bit different each week. So telling the clients that we believe in their value, adapting the quotes to fit your group, as I said, and then structure the group with a ritual. So have everyone set up, read the quotes, and then engage in art making, and then sharing, reflecting, and then everyone cleans up together. And the structure is really important to this. I'd encourage you to explore the full spectrum of hope and encourage individual interpretations. And also, if you do this as a group, to set aside time for a reflection on the whole book when it's done. Because that was one of the really beautiful parts of this, was taking that time where we sat around the table and everyone's holding their book and they open it up and they flip to the page that they want to share. Because this was a book form in the forensic environment, they were actually able to keep it in their property. And this is another reason that using this modified accordion binding was essential, because they were able to keep that with their things, because it was just a stack of paper. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing and see if there are some questions that, so I see the question about, is it ever completed? And we addressed that one. What kind of paper? So I really recommend a heavier weight paper, but in the workplace, I've used, like cardstock. In the state hospital, we used Bristol and watercolor and whatever paper they wanted. The other nice thing about doing this modified accordion is that you can use paper of all different sizes, all different weights and colors. So you can see I've added some here that's different color paper. Only thing that matters is it's the same size. So as long as you keep it that same size, you're good to go, and you can put it together that way. And then really any size. So I've just worked with what's easy, which is 8.5 by 11. Folds up nicely, stores nicely. It's easy to print out. So the file that you will receive is a PDF that is ready to go to print it onto 8.5 by 11 paper. But you can also print onto just regular paper, and people can cut the quotes out, which is what we did in the forensic environment. So, any other questions that people have, thoughts they want to share? Oh, additional tips for supporting low literacy population. Yeah, reading them aloud. And the individuals that we worked with, they intuitively came to that place of making those little pictographs. And some of them actually ended up collaging their little images in to their final page, which was really lovely. But I think that's a beautiful practice to encourage, to also just affirm, go with what makes sense for you, right? So here's the quote. If you want to work with the quote on your page, that's great. If you want to just work with the feeling that this quote inspires in you, and several of you worked that way today, where you didn't necessarily vibe with the whole quote, but there was a word or part of it that you connected with. And so the text of the quote itself doesn't have to be on every page. So that's another thing that you can encourage. It really was very empowering for the individuals at the state hospital, because words have been used against them in so many different contexts. And then for those who are low and no literacy, they felt completely separate from this idea of a book. And for them in particular, to have this book that was not only theirs, a piece of property that was theirs, but one that they had created, one they had authored, that was huge for them. Yeah, it would be lovely to share them online. Absolutely. I love that idea. Maybe I'll make a hashtag. If I do that, I'll include that and have Dan send that out to folks, because it is, this is my 5th or 6th one so far, because I did all the ones at the state hospital, and then ones in collaboration with older adults, and one in collaboration with children. And it's neat to have these different editions. And if you're the facilitator, to engage with the quotes yourself in different ways as you go through doing this. Yeah, and you can absolutely, I see the question about kindergarten children and using only words. Absolutely. Absolutely. It might be interesting to incorporate children's stories that have hopeful messages. And maybe you have an image of the protagonists and they're making their own hope responses there. And yes, in the original group, there were different themes each week. And so if you are interested in implementing this with a curriculum, definitely do reach out. I'm happy to share how I structured that before with the lesson plan. I'd be happy to share that. Okay, and then the accordion gluing process. So you fold the page in half. So you have your piece of paper and it's folded in half. And then you have all of your pieces of paper and they're all folded in half. And then on the open side, on one edge, you just run some glue right there. I like a permanent glue stick. I think that's the most forgiving. You can absolutely use fancy bookbinding glue, but this works a lot better for most group settings. It's just a line of glue stick glue right there along the edge. And then you slowly build up your book. So you line up your corners and your edges. And then the whole thing accordions open like that, because it's only glued on that one edge instead of being glued the whole page to the whole page. Because what I found is when you glue whole page to whole page, there's a lot more instances where someone's going to get it misaligned and their book is going to end up skewed. This is a lot more forgiving, and it enables you to build the book as you go. So I think there's something about that sequencing that can happen, the reordering that can happen. It's really, really great. Yes, the backs are blank, correct. The backs never get used. And what you can do if you want to bind it is you can wrap a ribbon, fabric here along the open spine. And then it is more like a hard book form. You can even put a hard cover front and back and have a ribbon that goes around there. You can do just single ribbons going this way, or you can leave it open. And the other nice thing about a modified accordion book is it lays open flat. So hold it up a little closer so you can see that spine. Because it's not bound here, it lays open nice and flat. And it also means that your image isn't getting cut off. So if I fill this whole page with an image, I don't have stitch marks that are going down the middle of my book. So there's lots of benefits to this format. All right, wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for this time, and I'm super excited to share the resources with you, and do reach out if you're interested in the original lesson plan. It was developed for a forensic environment, but I think the structure of it will give you a sense of how you might implement that.
Thank you so much, Erin. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today and participating in the Personal Hope Book. Just wanted to show you in the chat, there is a brief survey, and if you can take the time to give us your feedback, that really helps us better serve our community. We'll also be sending that survey out to all the participants with a link to this recording for this program, and also to the handout with the quotes that Erin had mentioned earlier. You'll see on the screen, you can keep track of Erin on her website and her LinkedIn, and her handle, Two Little Wings. And then to your left there, you can see some upcoming trainings that are taking place. Our online certificate program in social emotional arts, and also strengthening emotional resilience in children and teens through art in February. So please keep in touch with us. And once again, thank you, Erin, and thanks to all of you for joining us.